if it means the story is going to be better in the end. And I think with self-publishing, you can just write it, draw it, and then publish it. With an editor, there's a lot more steps in between.
I found with Mice Templar, the immediate creative team is the editorial, and there's a lot of times like there's a freedom that comes with it, but after the fact you look back at some things you did in some issues, some panels, some sequences, and you go, oh man, this book would have benefited if I'd had an editor. But now that but now that I'm doing some more mainstream with Marvel, I'm applying a lot of how the editors are working with me and trying to self-apply that to the independent work that I'm doing. And I believe that the new work is showing signs of improvement.
Having an editor is terrific if you're not completely sure of the story that you're doing. Having an editor is a complete pain in the butt if you're very sure of the story that you're doing. A really good editor is one who cares. And sometimes a good editor who cares will get out of your way, and sometimes a good editor who cares will micromanage you to death. It's a little bit like being nuzzled to death. But for example, the girl comic story that I did, it was basically two mutants walk into a bar, haha. A lot of simple-minded jokes about what kind of drink any given superhero would drink. Har, hardy, har, har, barking spider for Gwen Stacy, yuck, yuck. And then I find out that the book is intended for a teen audience, and that automatically made it mature material, the fact that they were in a bar drinking alcohol. And so my editor said, you know, look, I can make this work if there's some other context to the story, so that if somebody comes back and says, isn't this a shocking treatise on teaching teenagers how to drink, she can say, why no, it's a poignant growing up story, and I have the papers to prove it. And she was right. She was right. Helping you aim your story at an audience is sometimes a useful exercise, not always, because when you think of a story and you get excited about it, you never think about the audience. You never think about it, and in a way you shouldn't. Not at the outset, because you know you can cut off whole hunks of worthwhile story vibe in order to say, oh, this should be 17-year-old goth girls, or whatever, and narrow your story down too much. But once you've really got it slapped into shape and it's ready to be expanded upon, a good editor can be really useful, if only to play the role of your friend who says, I don't get it. The person who says, I see what you mean to do with this story or this scene or this line or whatever, but if you did it this way, it'd be better. That one really excitable friend you have that you put your work in front of them, and they say, oh, that's so cool, because I can tell that if this happens, this and this and this and this and this, and what happens next. That's often a very good motivator in and of itself, a really into it editor. They're a super reader. Good ones. Who write for you and your story.
Well, I self-publish everything with Carla Studio, and so I'm my own editor, which can be difficult, but also you know that your creation is fully on yourself, and there's no one else to blame, and you get the full control, which is really nice to have. And then just recently we did an anthology with some artists that we cherry-picked that we liked. So in that instance, I did get to work with other writers, and I was like, I guess as editor of this project, I totally gave complete control and free reign. There was a few spelling errors that I corrected, but
that's good. God bless you.
But besides,
I'm sorry.
But besides that, I really just wanted it to be a fun project, and I wanted the artists to have fun with it since Carla Studio was publishing it. So. I just wanted to get out everyone's name together. So it's good to work with other artists and writers that you know of and put together your own anthology if you want to self-publish that, and it gets everyone's name out at once. And I felt it was an extreme benefit to work with other artists, and some of the artists in here are like people that have worked with Top Cow, Kenneth Rocafort, or Rafael Navarro. He's an animation storyboard artist for his daytime job, and he does amazing artwork as well, and also Elizabeth Waddison, who did Charm School. It's one of my books that I got drawn into comics in college. So it was good to work with her, and she's back in comics now because of this book. So I really am excited about doing that and working with other artists in that instance, and other artists and writers. So I would suggest getting friends together and creating a book and making your own anthology as well. So you don't have to like be necessarily working with a top, big 2 or 3, publishers. You can totally do it yourself and approach publishers later on, especially once you learn your ropes for like the first few years. It definitely helps you make mistakes before you hit it big time.
For me, an editor has to earn my respect. When I start with a new editor, what comes out of his mouth, I actually look at and read and say, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, or he does. I mean, and you get it. On Jonah Hex, I've been writing it with Justin now for 5 years. We got 60 issues out, and we've had 5 editors. And every time a new guy comes in, it's almost like we break in editors on that book. And
you're just plain break them.
Yeah, well, no, they move on to greener pastures. But what happens is that they want to come in and they have excitement, but they want to change everything. And I always have to remind them, I'm like, there's a reason we got to issue 60. So let's work together. So it's an interesting process. Now, a great editor will look at your script and say, there's a flaw here. Or you drop something and you didn't pick it up later. And that's what a great editor will do. Will point out something that you might have missed. In the excitement of writing it, your story goes off base. You're watching, you're following the spine, and all of a sudden you go off this way. A great editor will be there to pull you in. I have been very fortunate, but I've had a couple of editors that were frustrated writers and would take stuff I've done and say, wouldn't it be cool if this guy did this, or if Jonah Hex cried and then he laughed, and I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And editors that want to be writers, I understand it, and I get it, but I have to also remind them that, I got hired to write it, and let's find a happy medium. So it's a very delicate balance, because if you're completely rude to them, then they don't want to work with you, and then they'll fight you on everything. It's a very interesting relationship. It could be very beneficial, especially when you're starting, to have somebody with experience, be able to point stuff out. But the stuff I've self-published, I have Amanda Connor in the other room. And Amanda is fantastic. I take whatever I do and I bring it to her, and she'll be the first one to rip me a new hole. She'll go, this is terrible, I don't get that, what's going on there? And I totally respect her for it, and I love her for it, because she definitely is looking at it with a fresh eye, and she doesn't care who I am. And it's the perfect relationship in that respect. So having somebody that has no problem telling you how it really is even good. It's a good thing when you're self-publishing, because you're in your own head. You just want to tell a story, and then you realize, like, what the hell, And I think you mentioned earlier, you write the stories for yourself, and it is, because if you're laughing at it, you think, well, everybody else will. But then you realize that, I have a sick sense of humor. A guy falling down 50 flights of stairs is funny to me. Where another person's calling 911 and getting an ambulance, I'm giggling. So you understand that what you kind of trying to say may not relate.
That's when you do a webcomic.
yeah, exactly. So editors can be great, or they can be a complete disaster, but they have to earn my respect, and that's how I treat all of them, pretty much.
You sir, Pat.
Hi. That's a good segue to the question that I had. This is coming from the viewpoint of someone who's just writing his first script. I haven't self-published anything, I'm just writing a script. When you show your scripts to people, would you trust someone's opinion who's more steeped in traditional literature background, or someone who just likes comics, for lack of a better phrase? And I mean trust them on the quality of the storytelling.
Quality, you mean the mathematics of the storytelling? You're talking about the actual...
Is this a good story? Does this hold me? Am I interested?
In general, you might have to use a couple of people, because if some people say I don't like romantic movies. We've all read movie reviews where the first thing is, I generally don't like horror movies. And I really don't read it after that, because I'm like, if you don't like horror movies, why are you reviewing this horror movie? Don't tell me, So I think a couple of people's opinion out of the gate might be okay for you to do. Obviously, people you respect, and also take their opinions and decipher it. Don't take it for word for word. Just look through it. God, it's like meeting a girl in a bar. Take it for what it is. Listen to the words, what they're really saying, and pull what you know. It's gonna have to come back to you. You're gonna have to either say, I never go all in with anybody's opinion. Only